Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us in today's session on GitOps at Scale with Jenkins and Argo CD on Kubernetes. My name is Mukulika Kapas. I'm a product manager with Intuit Developer Platform. Today with me, I have my colleague.
Deepthi Panthula from the same organization.
Okay, so today we are going to talk about how we are running Kubernetes at scale at Intuit, how we implemented GitOps at scale, and then we'll have a cool demo, and then we'll talk about what's next. It's a 45-minute session, so we'll spend 15 minutes on slides, 15 minutes on demo, and 15 minutes on any question answers that you guys have. So who we are from Intuit. Intuit is a $6 billion software company based out of Silicon Valley. We have 50 million customers. We build accounting and financial software. You know us by software names like TurboTax, QuickBooks, and Mint. We were founded in 1983, and we have 4,000 developers, so we always need to have tools and platform for these developers to build, deploy, run, and scale software. So with that, in 2018, Intuit started its Kubernetes journey. So how many of you have used Kubernetes, are using or trying? Okay, great. Okay, so in early 2018, Intuit decided to build its modern SaaS platform or Intuit development platform on containers and Kubernetes to increase developer productivity, to increase availability, reliability of its services, and to have better CI/CD, improved time for MTTR. So how is this platform built? Intuit has been on a cloud journey for last 3 to 4 years. All our services run on AWS. So if you look at the platform, the lowest level layer is the AWS cloud. On top of that, we are running all our Kubernetes clusters. We use open source Kops to set up the clusters today. We are also going to support AWS EKS very soon. On top of that, we have the networking layer. Today, all our services talk to each other through Intuit Gateway. We are evaluating Istio Envoy service mesh so that at least for east-west traffic across services, they can go through a mesh. On top of that, we have our CI/CD pipeline. We use GitHub as our source repo, Jenkins 2.0 as our CI pipeline. We use JFrog Artifactory as our image repository, artifact repository, and we use ArgoCD, another open source by Intuit, for continuous deployment using GitOps methodology to Kubernetes. On top of that, the first two layers are our different application service layers and developer experience layer. But today we'll focus mainly on the CI/CD pipeline using GitOps methodology. To the extreme left are our observability tools. Today we are using Wavefront for metrics, Splunk for logs, AppDynamics, and PagerDuty. So with that, let's move to the next slide. Before I move to how we implemented GitOps at scale, I wanted to explain why we needed GitOps and how we are implementing GitOps at scale across multiple Kubernetes clusters. We run lots of medium-sized clusters. Our clusters are not like huge 100-node clusters. Our clusters are typically 30 to 40 nodes. Why? Because of blast radius and security reasons. We have clusters by BU, by segments. Then all our clusters are multi-tenant. What does that mean? When a developer asks for environments, when a developer asks for Kubernetes environments, he gets a Kubernetes namespace within the cluster. So if a developer onboards to this platform, he gets a QA namespace, a E2E namespace in a pre-prod cluster. He gets a staging namespace and a prod namespace in prod cluster. Again, based on his region requirements, requirements. We will have a Kubernetes cluster in US East, a Kubernetes cluster in US West. So he gets namespaces in those. So all these clusters are shared. Developers don't even get to see the clusters. They just come to our dev portal, ask for environments, and then they get namespaces within the cluster. We run Kubernetes as our compute engine. For persistence, we use AWS services like RDS, DynamoDB. So we have to make sure our namespaces can talk to AWS services very seamlessly. When users onboard to the platform and they use Kubernetes, they should be able to access the AWS database services as well from these namespaces. So this is a graph of our Kubernetes adoption at Intuit. As I said, we started building the platform in early 2018. So around mid 2018, we were ready to onboard services to this platform. And then starting late 2018, everybody, the whole company started onboarding to this platform. Today, we are running 3,000 applications on Kubernetes, some in pre-prod, some in prod. An application is a service in a unique environment. So if it is 3,000 applications and each service has 4 to 5 environments, it's basically around 700 to 800 unique services running on this platform. Some more statistics. So we rolled it out to 4 business units with 30 sub-BUs. 1,000 developers have been trained on containers and Kubernetes and have started running their services. This platform is maintained by 40 Kubernetes platform developers or DevOps engineers. We don't have any separate SRE role. Everybody has been trained and everybody is a developer or a DevOps engineer. We are running around 130 plus managed clusters. Again, developers don't get to see the clusters. They just access namespaces. We have around 3,500 managed namespaces. All of these clusters run on around 4,000 nodes today. And then we are onboarding more and more services every day. So because of this massive infrastructure, because we want to move this entire company, all backend services, all new services, even the UI service infrastructure to Kubernetes, moving the entire company to Kubernetes, we also needed to look at our CI/CD approach. And then we decided to adopt GitOps methodology. So first, let me explain what is GitOps. Anybody familiar with GitOps? Okay, so GitOps is a methodology where Git is the single source of truth for the desired state of a system. So earlier, developers used to use Git for their source repo. Now Git is the repo for storing everything running in the system. Okay, that is the first step. What is the second step? You need to have like an agent or a controller or some system which will continuously diff your live system with the Git to see if there is any change in Git or if there's any change in the system and sync based on what is there in Git. Okay? And then the third point is any changes you want to make to the live system, you cannot do through a command line or running a script or kubectl apply. You have to make a change in Git, and then your agent or controller will update the live system based on the change to Git. These are the 3 main principles. A lot of people ask, how is it different from infrastructure as code? Again, infrastructure as code save the infrastructure in Git or in some other repo, but then the next 2 principles also have to apply, and then only it's GitOps. A best practice in GitOps is to have separate repo for your code and a separate repo for your deployment configuration. So for us, as soon as a developer wants to use our platform and wants to use this new CI/CD, they get 2 repos. One is their source repo where they start writing their code, and another is a deployment repo with all their Kubernetes manifests. Best practices, again, if you are building a microservices architecture, you have 1 repo per service for deployment configuration. You might have separate access control for this deployment configuration repo from your source repo if the developer doesn't have access to deploy to, say, prod. Okay, so then you will have separate access control. In Intuit, we follow DevOps, so every developer owns his service and has access to every environment. So they have the similar access control. And then the final one is, so you have one deployment repo, but you need to be able to deploy to multiple environments: dev, test, E2E, staging, production. So the best practice, either you use branch per environment for that deployment repo, or you use overlay files like folders for each environment with overlay files, and we'll see more when we see the demo. Okay, so these are some of the best practices of implementing GitOps. In our case, we use ArgoCD, an open source controller for implementing GitOps. What ArgoCD does is we register Git repos and Kubernetes cluster endpoints to ArgoCD. ArgoCD is always listening and checking if with the deployment Git repo, the system is in sync. If it is not, it syncs the system. So if I update my Git repo with a new image ID, ArgoCD immediately sees, okay, in test environment, I have a new image ID to deploy, and it syncs using kubectl apply to that environment. So now that we have talked about why, what is GitOps, let's talk about why GitOps. First and major reason is every change is verifiable and auditable, because every change is a Git commit or a pull request. It's a consistent rollback process, because if you want to roll forward or if you want to roll back, you just update Git with the new image ID or the new number of replicas, whatever you want to deploy in your system. And then it facilitates disaster recovery. What if you have problems with your Kubernetes clusters tomorrow? You just take this same deployment repo, attach it to your new Kubernetes clusters or new Kubernetes namespaces, and you can deploy within minutes. So it facilitates even disaster recovery. The whole experience is very developer-centric. Developers are anyway using Git, so now they can even do deployment, everything through Git, and we will see in the demo. And Kubernetes being a declarative system, the GitOps methodology really works well with Kubernetes. So this is our GitOps pipeline at Intuit. It's a very simplified view of what we have. We have many more stages, approval, etc. But basically, a user, a developer gets two repos, a code repo and a deployment repo. When he makes changes to code or commits changes to code, it triggers our Jenkins CI pipeline. Okay, Jenkins CI pipeline builds the artifact, builds the image, pushes it to Artifactory. In our case, we use JFrog Artifactory. You might be using Docker Hub or something else. And then the CI pipeline also updates the image ID in deployment repo to promote the image from environment to environment. That is the new step for implementing GitOps. So as soon as, say, I built image number version 0.3, my CI pipeline created the image, pushed it to JFrog, updated the deployment repo saying, okay, in my test environment, now the image I want to deploy is 0.3. The ArgoCD is now listening to the deployment repo. It sees that, okay, in my test environment, the image ID has updated to 0.3. So I need to now sync it with Kubernetes environment in test. There was no change to the other environments, and so ArgoCD will not sync it with the other environments. So let's talk a little bit about Jenkins at Intuit. Jenkins has been our build and test platform for many years. Today we are using Jenkins 2.0. It is mainly our CI platform. We run 12,000 jobs per day. All our services use Jenkins. For GitOps, so that's why we decided to not use any other pipeline. We decided to use Jenkins because developers are already familiar with Jenkins. So we added more than CI pipeline, we added steps to promote the image through environments. So Jenkins' main job in GitOps is to promote the image by commit to deployment repo with new image tags. Jenkins does not have access to our Kubernetes cluster. So Jenkins just promotes the image to Git, and then ArgoCD is the one which has access to our Kubernetes cluster. Like Jenkins, ArgoCD is also open source. It was actually open source by Intuit a year ago. It supports different Kubernetes manifests, customize, Helm, vanilla Kubernetes YAMLs. The biggest value of Argo CD is it can do multi-cluster deployment, because from the get-go when we were building it, we knew that okay, for our kind of environment, developers will need to deploy their code to multiple environments in multiple clusters. Because their pre-prod namespaces will be in pre-prod clusters, their prod namespaces will be in prod clusters. So a single Argo CD can actually orchestrate across multiple clusters. It has other enterprise features like single sign-on, RBAC, multi-tenancy, full audit trail, etc. It has a GUI for easy monitoring and troubleshooting, and Deepthi will show all of that. Also, there are different ways you can do GitOps. Your controller can be you can either enable Autosync so that your controller is listening to the repo and automatically updating the cluster, or in a more controlled environment like Intuit being a fintech company, it can be driven by a pipeline. So Jenkins, after promoting the image, might tell Argo CD, hey, now you go ahead and sync with the Git. Okay, so Jenkins still doesn't have access to repos, clusters. Jenkins just tells Argo CD, now you access. So again, it can do either autosync or manual sync. Also, we have controllers to do blue-green and canary deployment out of the box on Kubernetes. In today's demo, we will not be able to show that, but you can always go to our website and see how to do it. So again, this is our GitOps controller, which is managing today 3,000 apps across 130 plus Kubernetes clusters at Intuit. So before we go to the simplified version of the demo, so as I said, when an Intuit developer comes to our development platform and wants to create a new service, whether it's a microservice or a macro, he gets two repos, one for source code, one for Kubernetes manifest with starter application code, starter Docker file, starter Jenkins file. He gets a Jenkins CI pipeline. He gets artifact tree folder in Intuit's container registry. He gets two Kubernetes namespace, QA and E2E in pre-prod cluster, and then he gets Argo CD project and applications tied to these namespaces. And then he has a working end-to-end GitOps workflow, and then all he needs to do is start updating his source repo. So with that, I will pass on to Deepthi for a cool demo.
Thank you, everyone, for attending the session, and thanks, Mukulika. Now that we have learned about GitOps and why it's being used, let's get into a quick demo on how GitOps methodology is applied using Jenkins and Argo CD. So basically, here in this demo, it's a simple demo, it's a simplified version. I'm sure you all have very complex use cases in your day-to-day use. But today we are going to show the demo using Jenkins file, Jenkins pipelines, as well as the Argo CD. So in the Jenkins pipeline, we are going to show how we are going to build an image, publish that image in artifact management, and also promote the image tags from one environment to the other environment. And for the Argo CD, what we are going to talk about is Argo CD is our continuous delivery system used in the Kubernetes, where we are going to show the rollback and the roll forward of an application for different environments. So let me get started by showing our source repositories. All right. All right. So as as we discussed earlier, one of the couple of the best practices for GitOps is to use two source code, two repositories, two GitHub repositories, one for the source code and one for the deployment configuration of Kubernetes. So let's talk about the the source code repository. So I have a Docker file here and a Jenkins file. Jenkins file is nothing but a text file which has this Jenkins pipeline configuration checked into the source code. Here we are using a declarative style pipeline, but again it's up to the people or the developers to use the scripted if they are well versed with their Groovy. The reason why we chose was it's simple and user friendly. So if you click on the Jenkins file, let's see what we have. So we have three stages. One is build, where we are going to build a Docker image and publish it to Docker Hub here, and there are other two stages where we are going to promote the tag to the E2E environment and the prod environment, more when we actually do the commit and try to visualize the pipeline. So let's get into the deployment repo or configuration. So the other best practice that we talked about is to have separate branches for these environments or have the overlay files in the different folders. Now that for the demo sake we are using E2E and prod environments, so we have two different folders, and here we are using the customize for this configuration management here. So if you look at the customization YAML, we have this new image, the new tag for that image that we are going to promote. So whenever a pipeline gets kicked off, this tag gets updated by the Jenkins pipeline, and that's where the ArgoCD would be listening and taking this new tag to promote or deploy it to the live system for that particular environment. So now that we talked about these two repositories, let's go to the ArgoCD UI on how it looks like, what needs to be done here before we go into the actual committing the changes. So this is a UI piece that I was referring to. So before if we want to set up something in the ArgoCD for which it has to listen to, we need to do two things for any application. One is to register that particular deployment repository on the ArgoCD UI. So if you go to the settings, and then there is a repository section here where we have added the ArgoCD demo deploy repository already added here, so it keeps on listening here. And the second one is to add the cluster endpoints, basically the namespace endpoints in that cluster where we are trying to deploy. Once these two things are done, let me also show you something else. So if you look at these boxes here, each of these box is called an application here, where you are deploying that application in that E2E environment, or if you look at the prod, you are looking at an application that is getting deployed into the prod. So let me click on this to show you how it looks like. So this is a simple the deployment structure that it looks like. So if it's an application here, and it has a service and a deployment associated with it with a replica set, and since we have defined as a replica to be one, it has only one pod running. There are two little icons here which says that it's in sync and the app is healthy. So if you look at here, it says sync. That means that the tag that is checked in the GitHub repository, in the deployment repository, is in sync with whatever is deployed in this particular environment. So when we are doing the actual pipeline, you would see that the state gets moved to out of sync here. And then ArgoCD listens to it, it syncs it, and it deploys to the the subsequent with that subsequent tag. This is how it looks like. So before, and let me actually log into our Jenkins, and this is our sample pipeline. Again, as discussed, we have three phases here: build, deploy to E2E, and deploy to prod. When I say deploy to E2E, basically is just promoting the tag and committing the tag to that particular E2E folder in the deployment repository that we just showed or talked about. So let's make a simple change here and then see how it flows. So I'm going into the source code repository. This is my simple JavaScript. Let me again. It's not a good idea to make the change here, but just for the interest of time, let me make a change or commit it directly here.
was running before.
Oh yeah, okay, we can do that too. So if I go
Just to
here,
make sure that we are really syncing.
right. So if you look at the initially the E2E, let's look at the app to see what it's talking. So it's, if I go to this URL, it says hello everyone. Now that in the source code we are making a change to say hello Jenkins world, right. So let me commit directly. Now that I made a change, there is a webhook that's listening to this one, so it would automatically trigger the pipeline. So it might take a few seconds for it to get a executor so that the build would run.
We have enough Jenkins experts in the house if it gets stuck. So, but hopefully.
Yeah, it should be quick. But in the build phase, what it does is it checks out the source code. It tries to build the image from the Docker file that we mentioned, and then see it started already. So it's trying to check out the source code. It's trying to build it, and once it's done, it tries to push it to the Docker hub that we have mentioned in our Jenkins file. So I want to be really quick here because the sync and the out of sync happens really quick. So I just wanted to go to the E2E phase and show in the Argo UI and how it acts. So just give us like maybe a few more seconds while that is happening.
Maybe refresh.
It will. Yeah, it's successfully tagged. So now that it's trying to do that,
so it should be out of sync already in Argo.
It started. Now it will be. So let's go to the.
It already synced, I think.
No. So if you see, it's running at the replica set of 15. So now it's out of sync, and ArgoCD was listening to it. It took the git tag, and then it's trying to bring up a new. It already brought up a new remote. It was quick, new pod, and now it's terminating the old one. So if you see this again, the app is brought to a healthy state, and as well as it's synced. So if you go to the URL that we were seeing, it should show hello Jenkins world. But let's see. Yeah, yay.
Yeah.
So we have deployed to our E2 environment. So let's go back to the, yes, I know we are all excited. So let's go back to our pipeline. So we don't want to deploy to our production right away. We wanted to have some checks. So just for the, so that we just added one more step here where we wanted to, 1 second. Let me refresh. So we added okay, it's done. So we added a manual approval process in place where we wanted to, it's asking whether you want to really approve the deployment. Now that we have seen that it's working in E2E, we wanted to go ahead and click on the proceed. And one more thing, what we did is we wanted to fail the deployment in production so that we can show the rollback use case as well. So let's see what will happen. So now that I'm approving the deployment to production, okay, it's already processing. So let's go to the ArgoCD and then see what will happen in our production.
So it went out of sync.
It went out of the sync. It tried syncing it. Then there is an error because again I purposefully failed it in the production. So it's in the crash loop back off. So what we have to do, or what we can do, is again, no need to panic because we can do the rollback either from the ArgoCD UI or directly going to the GitHub by taking the previous tag ID, which is which is not a faultier version, and then do it. Since we wanted to now that we are in the ArgoCD UI, let's see how we do the rollback from here. Okay, so one thing what I wanted to make sure is we need to disable the sync piece here, because if you are going to roll back to a previous version, then it's again the ArgoCD would be listening to the GitHub tag and try to update it, and we'll be always in this loop. So let's quickly go and disable the autosync here so that there is no autosync is happening. That's one thing that we need to do. And the second one is go to the history and roll back, pick the right version that we wanted to roll back to, and then do the rollback. So if you click on it here, so if you see this, it's already started creating a container, creating a pod here, it's in running state and it's already terminating this one. So we are all good here, but one thing what you see is it's out of sync, and the reason being is the GitHub has a latest tag which is a faultier version, and that we are running with a newer version. So we need to do two, either one of them. One, go and take the tag ID that we have and try to update the deployment repository to make sure that we have the right version running. Or if you already know the fix, and then you can always go through this entire CI/CD pipeline and update it. So now if you see this, let's go here and let's get the UI, and then it's running in prod, which I didn't change because it's in the world test, right?
Yeah, because
perfect. Yes, exactly. So, yep, this is what we have for you guys. So just to give you a quick recap, we showed on, we talked about the best practices that the GitOps world recommends, right? And also we talked about the roll forward and rollback use cases and how it's done using ArgoCD. Yep, I hope you guys like the demo. Now back to you, Mukulika.
Okay. We have 10-15 more minutes, so quickly we will go over last few slides and then open it up for questions. So we already implemented GitOps at scale across hundreds of clusters and thousands of applications at Intuit. We have also implemented Canary and Blue-Green, which you can see in Argo's GitHub repo. What we are working on next, we are working on Argo experiments next. In this modern world, you would want to run multiple versions of your software as experiments, running experiments, and it should be very easy to swap between the versions, and it should be very easy to analyze those versions. So we are working on Argo experiments next. The second thing we are working on is today, the way we do Canary is we spin up multiple replicas of one version and then a few replicas of the newer version, and then we send traffic, split the traffic like that based on instance scaling. We want to do fine-grained traffic routing and separate it from instance scaling. So basically using traffic routing using service mesh. And then the third thing that we are working on, you saw GitOps on Kubernetes, how to do GitOps with Kubernetes objects. Next we are working on is GitOps of AWS resources. If you need to make some changes to AWS resources, how to do that. So hopefully we will be able to open source that also very soon, but that's what we are working on next. This is our Argo community. Although the project is pretty new and has been around for 1 year, these are some of the large names who are users and contributors to the project. And it can work with any pipelines. We use it with Jenkins, but you can hook up any other pipeline as well. And these are some of the URLs that you can go to know more or join our Argo Proj Slack channel. We are here to hire good developers or DevOps engineers. So feel free to DM me or Deepthi, or we will hang out right after the session, or we'll be in the booths. So please reach out to us. With that, thank you so much for joining. Now we are ready to take questions. So, yes.
So since you have Argo, have you considered or would you consider Jenkins X, or do you use it anywhere in the CI process?
So in current state of Jenkins X, we are not considering it because firstly, we use Argo for deployments. Secondly, for our cluster management, we have other tools which we are going to open source very soon. So right now, we might use Jenkins X more for CI pipeline, but not for cluster management.
So on my team, one of the big concerns with GitOps is our Git server is not. It doesn't have the same SLA as the rest of our production system. Like, we're not supposed to rely on Git for any production like deployments. So I'm just wondering what can be done if the Git server is down and you need to deploy something with Argo.
Sure. So Argo has manual deployment also. You can use Argo CLI, but you can also use kubectl apply. But yes, to implement GitOps, you do have to make sure your Git has the kind of SLA your production systems need. So yes, that has to be fixed. Git and artifact repository. These two, you cannot in the Kubernetes world. Yes.
Mukulika, I think Danny wants to answer.
Yeah, he is one of the Argo committers and might have more answers.
So everything ArgoCD is doing in the background ultimately boils down to a kubectl apply. So if your Git server was having issues, and you could always use the CLI or the kubectl to do the apply of your resources.
Yeah. So one of the stage in the pipeline, we can already have a manual stage saying kubectl apply. So it calls the ArgoCD, and ArgoCD would do the change. So
Or
we
you
don't
can
have
just go to Kubernetes and do it,
Yeah,
or
from the
just
CLI.
call ArgoCD CLI. ArgoCD has a very good CLI to do all of this. But I would still say, if you're implementing GitOps, you need to have a good SLA with Git.
So how do you handle orchestrating like multiple services that may be dependent on each other if you're making I guess a change or that requires changes to multiple services?
Okay. So firstly, if you are doing microservices and following 12-factor apps and all of that, you need to make sure you should be able to deploy your services independent of each other. Yeah, you should be able to test it well in your previous environments, and your services should be more backward compatible. But yes, that's the process. You want to add something?
So we recently created,
Sync waves.
yeah, added a new feature called sync waves. Sync waves basically allow you to specify a order of resources to apply. So first you could do service A, and then you could do service B if you want to host everything under one Argo CD application. Another way you could do it is you could have multiple Argo CD applications, and you have your CI system make the commits, at least one by one, and make some Argo CD calls to verify that this version was rolled out and is in a healthy state.
So because we are enterprises, not everything is microservices. So yes, sync waves was one requirement given to us. And the second, as he said, you can do it from the pipeline. Service A, service B, service 3.
Just a couple of Kubernetes questions. When you update the service, are you using a patch to update the pods, or are you deleting replicas and replacing them? And then the same question for rolling updates to the Kubernetes environment itself. Are you using Kapas to basically take worker nodes out and bring up new ones, or how are you practicing hygiene, Kubernetes hygiene?
So for our cluster upgrades today, we do use Kapas. We do the whole draining of the nodes and what is it called? We cordon, drain, and all of that. But keep an eye, we are going to open source multiple controllers in this space very soon, and from Intuit as a separate project, because cluster upgrade and maintaining 130 clusters, and we upgrade once a month because we have security requirement to update AMI patches every month. So we upgrade all these 130 clusters once a month. So we are going to open source multiple controllers in this space around reaping nodes, around deep monitoring of nodes. But we use Kapas today to cordon drain our clusters. But for making changes to applications, we use Bash.
So everything is applied using kubectl apply. So in the background, I'm not 100% sure on this, but I believe it makes patches to the resources that you changed. To go a little bit deeper, most of the services at Intuit use deployment objects, and so when we want to update to a new version, we change the image tag on the deployment, and when the deployment, when that change is applied to the cluster, the deployment controller will create a new replica set and use the max surge and max unavailable fields available in the deployment to basically control how you want to shift to the new version.
And does the repo keep up with whether the cluster is synchronized with the YAML, the actual Kubernetes YAML that's controlling versions?
So you update the repo and then the cluster gets synchronized. You
So-
don't
Just to repeat the question, does the Git repo stay in sync with the, or at least like, does it notice when the repo is out of sync with what's in the cluster?
It takes a long time to do those rolling updates.
Mhm.
And so I'm just wondering, does it also tell you whether Kubernetes?
Yes.
It does.
So like if I were to go into our demo and like if I were to do a kubectl edit on the deployment and change some value, ArgoCD would notice that change and then highlight that as out of sync. Depending on how you have ArgoC configured, it might not automatically revert that change or apply what is in the Git cluster, but that's more kind of depending on how you configure your application.
So just to add, in Deepthi's demo, if it didn't have one replica, if it had multiple replicas, and also if it was not like a hello world, it was a real app with a couple of minutes of the startup time, then you will see the out of sync for those minutes. Okay. Any other questions?
How much history does it keep?
Okay, so today ArgoCD keeps last 10 deployments. Yes. 10 changes, yeah. We haven't yet found anybody who needs more than that because the remaining are there in Git, but in ArgoCD, 10. Okay. Okay. We will hang out outside for a few more minutes if you guys have more detailed questions, but thank you for your time. Hope it was helpful.